You've got that nice texture and hint of sweetness, and they are just really tender while also still giving you all of those layers that we want in a biscuit. They taste as good as they look. No, they taste better than they look. Hey everyone, I'm Valerie, and we are going to be making accordion biscuits today. And what the heck are accordion biscuits, you might be asking yourself? They're basically really delicious home-baked biscuits, and the layers, they rise in the oven like an accordion. It is the best biscuit that's come out of my oven, and I grew up in Louisiana, and we are a biscuit making people. This began with my grandmother's biscuit recipe, and it has endured and evolved. Like, this is it. This is the best biscuit. So in this recipe, temperature is really important. We need some of our ingredients to be super cold, and that includes our butter and our cream. So I'm gonna go ahead, stick these back in the fridge until we're ready for them. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna whisk our dry ingredients in a large bowl. Got my all-purpose flour. I'm gonna whisk in sugar. It's gonna help the biscuits to brown. I've got baking powder, which is gonna help them rise, and a little bit of salt. It just kind of helps bring the flavors together. Just wanna make sure there aren't any big pockets of baking powder anywhere. I'm gonna add my cold pieces of butter into the flour. So if there is technique in a biscuit recipe, this is one of the places. We're gonna be using our fingertips. So I'm just putting a little flour to keep my fingertips in good working order so that they don't stick too much. I'm gonna take each little piece of butter and I'm just gonna kind of flatten it. And when I flatten it, I'm gonna kind of break it up a little because I don't want any really big pieces of butter. And I'm gonna just continue to toss it with flour because I don't want those pieces of butter sticking together. So I'm just gonna go through and do this with each little piece of butter. This step right here is a major step in getting you that accordion specialness that we have in these biscuits. Doing little things when you're baking or really doing anything in life can have real difference on the final outcome. I showed my mom how to make this recipe. This is now her favorite recipe to make, and every time she comes to visit me or any of my siblings that live out of town, she will make batches and batches of biscuits, and then she will put the biscuit dough all stamped out in the freezer so that we will have like biscuits for like the next 6 months. We're gonna put this back in the freezer. I probably picked the wrong time to like stock up on like frozen salmon. I lied, it was frozen shrimp. And I'm gonna whisk our liquid ingredients. I've got a single egg. Then I'm gonna whisk, adding my heavy cream. That's very cold and very thick. And I'm gonna add a little cream cheese. So my cream cheese was softened, so it was at room temperature, but that's because it just makes it easier to combine in this step. So I'm now gonna add my liquid ingredients right on top. I'm just kind of folding my liquids into the dry ingredients. And with biscuit dough, work like you've got a destination, like work like you're going somewhere. The faster you bring your biscuit dough together, the colder your butter has a chance to remain. So you want to fold until you've got a shaggy dough and most of your little flour bits are moistened. I'm gonna add a little bit more heavy cream. Grandma didn't have a recipe for biscuits. And this is probably why, because you do have to sometimes trust your instincts. And if you're like, hey, that shaggy dough is a little too shaggy, then you can add a little bit more cream. I don't see any huge pockets of flour. So this is a good sign. And you can also just test it and see, like, you take a piece, does it clump together easily? Because I've got wood, I like to use a little baking mat. But you know, if you've got any regular countertop or you're blessed with marble, definitely use that. I'm gonna tip my dough onto my workspace. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna gather my dough into a block. Instead of like a more traditional kneading the dough, we're gonna do something that's flattening and stacking the dough. So that's what we're gonna do to make layers. And it's kind of like a little quick, faux, easy lamination technique. And we're doing it for biscuits, so that we have like a guarantee that we're gonna have layers. Well, as long as our butter doesn't like get super melty. I'm going to now cut it in half and then stack it on top of the block and repeat this a few more times. I'm gonna use a dough scraper to cut it. And it's okay if it falls apart right now because we're on the first little stack and pat. And I'm just gonna pick it up with my dough scraper, set it on top. And as we repeat this process, you're gonna see the dough start to come together. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pat it. And each time we stack and pat, that dough should look a little bit smoother and smoother. And if you see little bits kind of flaking off the top, that's a good thing. It means you're getting those flaky layers. So let's repeat again. This half on top. So I did this a third and final time. And this time, I'm gonna pat it down to about 1 inch thick. I really enjoy the like pushing the biscuit cutter down into the dough. Like, oh my gosh. That feels really good. So I just put my biscuit cutter pretty close to the edge, but not on the edge because I don't want to pinch the edges. So this recipe makes a dozen biscuits. So I've got my biscuit cutter that's about 2.5 inches, and I'm gonna just punch out biscuits until I don't have any space left. And I'm placing them on a baking sheet, giving them a little bit of space because they're gonna need room to rise in the oven. So I'm just gathering the scraps. These are not gonna be the prettiest or even the like most tender. You know, they're great because when they come out of the oven and you can't help yourself, these are the ones that you can try first. If you want to stack it a few more times, you can, you don't have to. Ooh, now I have makeup on my shirt. So now that I've stamped out my biscuits, I'm gonna set them in the freezer to chill for about 10 to 15 minutes before I bake them. Okay, so I pulled these out of the freezer. And the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna brush them with an egg wash. It's gonna help our biscuits get nice and brown, but also like glossy and shiny on top. You don't want the egg wash to drip down the sides of the biscuits. That could kind of seal those layers that we have been working so hard to get, so we wanna keep them. So I have this Demerara sugar, which is large crystals. It doesn't put these biscuits into the like sweet category, but it does give a hint of sweetness, but not too much. So if you still want to like, you know, make an egg sandwich or something with them, you can. All right, I'm putting these straight into my super hot oven. It's gonna take between 20 to 24 minutes. If you actually kept them in your freezer and you're baking them frozen, completely frozen, because my mom came to visit you and baked you a year's worth of biscuits, you just wanna add a couple of more minutes to the time. My memories of these biscuits is always associated with the strawberry preserves we would put on them. I've got a cousin named Cousin Jato. He's 103 now, and he has farmed this land in Prairieville all of his life, like a lot of my ancestors have, and he grew strawberries. My dad, as a little boy, used to sell strawberries with him. And I remember getting a big crate. You have to like squat down low to pick the perfectly ripe berries because they might be next to berries that aren't ripe. If you've got a batch of strawberry preserves, you better have a batch of really good biscuits. Ooh. We've got some beauties going on here. This is a good looking batch of biscuits. Oh, I love just how golden brown they are on top. This is the best biscuit I've ever had. Grandma, I love you, but I think these are like the best. This recipe is worth it. Practice bakes perfect. I want to see you make this recipe. And when you do, share it with me so I can see. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.